Strolling through a valley of sakura trees, Grandpa casually asks Grandma what she would do if she turned young again. Grandma chuckles that it's a bit random coming from him. Grandpa gets nostalgic, feeling guilty about their poor, busy youth with no money for a honeymoon. Grandma waves it off, saying that just chatting like this is more than enough for her. She then swears the apple tree they planted after their wedding must be somewhere around here. Suddenly, Grandpa remembers the same apple tree, planted 60 years ago after their big day. He recalls that the tree snapped during Typhoon Mariel, but it still stands. As if fate heard them coming, they spot a golden apple hanging from its branches. Back home, Grandpa reflects on their journey of life together, which has been too rough. He thinks about how they stayed poor, busy, and grew old, and yet Grandma stuck by him through it all. Tearing up, he bets that she must have dreamed of wearing fancy clothes and strolling through town like a queen. Then, as he glances in the mirror, his face looks decades younger. Shocked, he dashes to show Grandma Ain if it is even real, but she is already glowing with youthful energy. Without missing a beat, he tackles her, pins her down, and declares their honeymoon trip is on now. This Grandma just rolls with it, and Grandpa is hooked on doing it all now. Rooting for these two like it's the finale of a rom-com. The next evening, Mino swings by to check on her grandparents. She's clueless to see them not chilling home but cleaning up the garden. Checking them out, she freezes the second she sees them, looking like they walked out of a skincare ad. Shocked, their creamy glow skin is sending Mino in deep shock. Mino's face is paler than a ghost at a rave. Grandpa Shozo and Grandma Ain turn to her like it's nothing weird, asking how she's doing. They scoop her up and take her inside to serve tea like this whole thing is totally normal. Inside, Grandma Ain is eyeing these two rather weirdly. Maybe this hot granny wants hands off on his man. But Mino's totally smitten with her Grandpa Shozo. She is freaking out if he even thinks of cutting his gorgeous white hair. Even though Shozo is not a fan of his bangs, but his granddaughter's words are set in stone. Grandma Ain is watching this whole thing with a major side eye. Shozo notices Mino hasn't been this spoiled before. Meanwhile, Mino even tries asking Grandma Ain if she can steal Shozo. But Granny's like hell no. Later on, Mino's dad swings by to pick her up, where she drops the major truth bomb of his entire life. She mentions Grandpa and Grandpa has turned young again, but his dad doesn't buy it at all. She even made her grandpa pose for the handsome grabber idol. At the park, where a bunch of elderly people play croquet, two old farts notice Shozo and Ain's absence for days, considering Ain's body must be hurting after all. They figure it's the age catching up to old grums. Though they're feeling quite lonely without that pair of old bones. The Mandarin luck couple in the park. Meanwhile, young Shozo is landing perfect hits back-to-back at the croquet game, leaving the ladies with high blood pressure. The old grannies are swinging hips to see such a gorgeous face going wild at this court. Two old men notice their wives bouncing off in excitement and call it their first time in a while looking like that. The old man thinks it's maybe what they call a stan. They never thought those two would turn young again. These old farts bet that no young ladies would be coming near their faces with Shozo around. While Shozo's hoarding ladies with his swings, Grandma Ain pours hot cuppa for Kokichi and Matsunosuke. Ain hands Matsunosuke the cup, and in a total freak out, he spills the whole thing on himself. Ain scrambles for a towel, and poor Matsunosuke confesses to having a alleged heart attack. Flashing back, Dad argues with Grandpa Shozo, trying to convince him to move in with them. But Grandpa Shozo isn't quitting on this house or the land of ancestors. He confronts his son that he can't afford to leave this house under any circumstances. He isn't budging even if his son begs him to stay with the family, as their bodies are at their limits. Shozo explains that their ancestors guarded this land for centuries, and he won't abandon this legacy. In the kitchen, Grandma Ain feels bad about putting Keide, Mino's mom, in such a difficult situation. Upon asking, she confesses that she only wants to be stuck by Shozo's side, and she would do anything for that. The next day, Keide shows up with groceries for Ain and the specific ingredients she asked for. She admires Grandma Ain's strength for love, sticking for decades together, and more. She's sure no storm can disrupt their love for each other. However, this new surprise hit Keide like a ton of bricks. Young Grandpa Shozo on the couch doesn't happen every day. Keide is short-circuiting here, while Shozo's chilling as usual. He informs Keide about Ain running late from the community center meeting. Seeing her crumble, Shozo had no idea that Keide didn't know about their overnight miracle of age. Excusing herself to wash her hands, she basically locks herself in the bathroom. To think Yoshiaki's dad could be this handsome, she thinks of telling Yoshiaki soon enough. Meanwhile, at the community center meeting, Ain's shivering and getting a really bad feeling. Then Yoshiaki comes by to see it for himself, and his mind's blown. That's when he gets Mino's boyfriend-girlfriend game with Grandpa. In her defense, Mino talks about this particular heavenly vibe coming off of the whole game. Yoshiaki is super pissed at Kaede for not telling sooner. She mentions having a face-off is rather convincing. All of a sudden, Mino starts getting all lovey-dovey with Grandpa again, now with a live audience. Kaede glares at this hungry tiger, that this ship isn't happening, even in fiction. Mino hints that this much won't hurt. Kaede points at his daddy being right here. Just then, Grandpa Shozo declares his unmatched love for Ain, and his soul belongs to her only. Ain, smacking his face, considers talking it out later. As they are about to leave, Yoshiaki promises to let Takahiro and others get the wind of this crazy turn of events. That's when Ain asks Yoshiaki how he's holding up with work. He tells her not to worry, but Ain pats her grumpy son. This sparks the memory of his childhood, having unlimited pats for his achievements. It hits him right in the feels. Grumbling, he promises to visit soon. Then Mino comes over for her turn and gets plenty of pats from Ain. Grandpa beams at having a house full of beauties. Later, Ain drills this into Shozo's brain so that he can just go fine by seeing her. For this year's sports festival, the old gang is short on people. This South and North merge is wreaking their odds at this game. Everyone is worried about dropping dead from exhaustion. Northtown's always winning with their giant macho monsters. The old folks are ready to throw in the towel. Suddenly, Matsunosuke, the brains of the operation, pulls out the big gun, Grandpa Shozo. Everyone starts worshipping this dude, bulging with muscles. Turns out, Matsunosuke baited him into joining this game. At the event, Northtown's old fart, the council president Haisuke Igarashi, comes to roast Southtown's old bones. He brings his grandsons from Northtown High, Shota of the soccer team, and Daiki of the baseball team to play. But Southtown's President Sano rolls their trump card, the apple farmers Saito duo. Haisuke cracks up, but at the sight of young Saito, Haisuke and his grandsons freezes like NPCs glitching. Next at the tug of war, other grandmas force Ain to do cheerleading. With one slick move of Ain's pom-pom, Shozo's rock-hard muscles breathe for life and win. At the three-legged race, Saito's team is running in pure sync, thanks to their 70 years together. The Saito duo is crushing every game like pros, barely breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, the Igarashi trio looks like their life bars have been sucked out dry. Shota and Daiki's confidence is in crumbles, regretting they even dared dream of Kashane. Haisuke is still salty about Shozo stealing Ain, and stealing his grandson's smiles. Then Ain shows up with lunch, revealing Shozo's turning real celebrity over there. Ain hears about Haisuke's wife, Misako, passing 3 years ago, leaving him with 2 adorable grandsons. Ain points at his grandsons being Haisuke's carbon copy, considering he confessed to Ain at this age. Shota and Daiko finally understand why they'd been picking fights with the South. Ain encourages the kids to hit them harder next year. Even Shota and Daiki agree that their grandpa never had the chance. A week later, Shota delivers a thank you gift to the Saito and runs into Mino, who lets him in. He's totally mind blown. He never knew his classmate was the granddaughter of the legendary Saitos, especially the one he admires so much. Trying to play it cool, he tries scrolling on his phone, but Mino wants to play a game. Through the creek, Ain and Kaede are freaking out over Mino having a boyfriend or a husband, but Ain assures that he's just a friend. Meanwhile, Shozo is already dreaming of great-grandchildren. Finally, the Saitos come out to talk. Shota thanks them for their help at the festival. He notices Shozo's chill face while Ain and Kaede keep the pressure tight. When asked, Mino proudly brags about Shota's killer skills in both sports and studies. While Granny Ain and Kaede are gossiping like old pals, Grandpa Shozo almost blurts out if Shota likes someone, but Granny shuts him down with a swift lip seal. Later, as they see Shota off, Ain and Kaede agree he's a cute, slightly awkward friend of Mino. Meanwhile, Mino whispers to Grandpa that she wishes Shota talked to her more. Shozo has an aha moment, but that's Grandpa's secret only. Afterward, Shota practically begs Grandpa Haisuke to let him run errands again. The next day, Mino finds out about Grandma proposing to Grandpa first, back when the odd-love marriage was a shocker. Shozo explains his old-school dad had already picked a friend's daughter as his bride. Even after trading blows with his father, Ain's support kept him together. She straight up told Shozo's fiancé to step off, and the girl happily agreed. Mino's eyes lit up, asking to reenact the showdown. Ain panics, but one look at Shozo's puppy face and she gives in. Grabbing Mino's cheeks, she yells to back off her man. Mino's jaw drops and Shozo is shaken. Deep down, Shozo grins at winning this feisty girl. Strolling through the fruit garden, two wannabe cool dimwits walk like they own the place. One genius declares that farming is super lame. Another believes it is strictly for old-timers. He adds that they better bolt out to the city, or they will end up broke and smelling like dirt. One is dreaming big here, trying to fly to Tokyo and get rich under one frame. One snob is hyped to ditch this middle-of-nowhere land and finally live the bachelor life in Tokyo City, with his girlfriend on speed dial. Suddenly, one of them spots someone in the distance. He squints, and it's a gorgeous woman tending to the apple trees. He recalls the old couple always tending to this apple farm. Grandma Ain waves, and their faces lit up like Christmas lights. These fools are straight up glitching now. Officially, apple heads are in need of care. They have no clue who this beauty is, maybe an old couple's daughter or granddaughter. Just then, Shozo rolls up out of nowhere in his face, takes Ain inside, and tells the kiddos to go home safely. The brats, still charmed, start rethinking their whole life plan and consider being farmers instead. Moving on, these clowns keep showing up in the fields now. One old day, Grandma decided to throw the pamphlet, but for a split second, that 3,000 yen dress caught her eye. Shozo saw the whole thing. The next youthful day, Shozo surprises Ain with that exact dress. He pretends to not notice it, but Ain's big hug from the back caught him off guard. Then they had a cute silent dinner. On Mino's recommendation, the lovebirds are watching a high school romance movie full of passionate kisses. Shozo thinks to himself, this stuff isn't something to do every day, as it's totally unnecessary. He bets that showing affection is possible without all that. But Ain is hugely captivated by the on-screen romance. Gathering her courage, she asks Shozo to reenact the scene. Shozo, with a glint in his eye, pins her against the wall, with his grip strong and sure. Ain feels out of breath, completely at his mercy. When he finally releases her, Ain acts totally cool, like this didn't do a thing for her. She pretends all the years with Shozo had dulled the spark, maybe. But deep down, Ain knows this hit harder than she's letting on. She's low-key freaking out, realizing she's playing way more dangerous game than she thought. She bets that this could spiral really quickly. One evening, Mino opens the door to a visitor, an old granny who's all smiles, thrilled to see Yoshiaki's kid all grown up. She's got Yudo for Grandma Ain. Mino's brain is spinning really crazy, trying to decode this hag's accent. Then Ain shows up, recognizing the fish seller granny. Mino is having a meltdown, complaining to Ain that she can't get her accent. Fish seller granny turns to Ain, asking what's her secret to staying so young. Ain, with a wink, reveals that she's just turning younger again. Then Granny squishes Mino's cheeks, casually asking her to marry her grandson. Suddenly, Ain swoops in, declaring that it's too early for this munchkin. Later, Mino, still shaken from the day, tells Grandpa that she wants to marry Grandma now. Saito's second son, Takahiro, has a daughter named Shiori, who's currently crashing at her grandparents' place after a blowout with her dad. Apparently, she got super mad and bolted to Grandma's place. Let's face it, Shiori's family drama kind of got her spotlight stolen by Grandma's turning young again saga. When Ain asks if she wants to eat, Shiori flat out declines, but then she zones out, flashing back to classmates ditching her, mocking her for being a boring bookworm. She had a huge fight with her dad about her career path, saying she was not brainy enough to do medicine. Shiori starts sobbing, feeling like she has nothing going for her. But Grandma Ain, being a wholesome treat, says that people who've got nothing to lose don't cry that hard. Then she pats Shiori on the head like a wise old sensei. Suddenly, Shiori recalls her childhood promise to one day cure Grandma's diseases. Ain grins and tells Shiori that she will always be the irreplaceable grandkid that she likes spoiling. Shiori's eyes well up, but now it's hunger time. She mutters that she's starving, and Grandma Ain swoops into the kitchen to whip up a feast. Flashing back, Ain feels bad for ruining Shozo's beach time and asks him to take Yoshiaki. Shozo blurts out that it's different with her. Ain instantly read between the lines. Ain gets that he wants to see her in a swimsuit and wants to show off. Shozo doesn't deny it like the cheeky old man. That night, Ain browses a swimsuit catalog, torn between modesty and modern style that leaves nothing to the imagination. She knows Shozo is a total pervert who's probably all for the extra skin show, but she thinks of wearing his gifted dress. All of a sudden, Shiori is hyping Ain up, declaring Grandma to slay in anything and blow his mind. But Ain, blushing hard, bolts out of her seat to the kitchen. One day, Ain gets a weird call, thinking it's Yoshiaki with a bad case of frog throat. The caller says he's super broke and needs cash ASAP. Ain, being her wholesome self, starts gloating about the greaties she has been on the field lately. The scammer's confused but pushes on, asking for money. Without skipping a beat, Ain pulls out her checkbook. She says that even if he's not her kid, he can always call for help in trouble. The scammer, probably crying inside, hangs up in pure frustration with himself. Later, the news drops that a guy from the It's Me scam group turned himself in. Shozo shakes his head and tells Ain to be more careful. But Ain, sipping tea like a boss, just let it. However, Ain believes 6 p.m. calls are totally weird. Ain notices that she doesn't need her glasses anymore. Mino's mind is absolutely blown watching her grandma's eyes reverse age. Ain claims to even read the days on the calendar now. Mino shouts while squinting at the same calendar that she can't see a thing. To push it further, Mino hands Ain a newspaper and stands across the room. Ain reads it pretty easily. She calls Grandma a superhero. That's when Shozo walks in, and Mino gets a funny idea. She pranks Ain into reading some flirty love lines loudly to Shozo. For a moment, the lovebirds totally fall for it, blushing like teens. But Ain hit Mino with the ultimate Ona reverse, leaving her full-on Dumbo. Shozo whispers under his breath that Grandma turns scary sometimes. Afterward, Mino's glued to her cheesy drama. Ain and Shozo are just chilling like retired bosses. Out of nowhere, Mino demands to know if her grandparents ever held hands together on a date. Without missing a beat, Ain deadpans say never. She mutters that they're not much of a show-off couple, and they claim not to do cheesy nonsense like that. Shozo butts in, explaining that hand-holding in old age is like a walking aid. Mino finds them to be big unromantic turds. The next day, Shozo and Ain had a walk to a local shop and bought a ton of vegetables. Suddenly, it gets totally chilly, and Ain's not wearing gloves. Ain's deep down testing Grandpa's awareness radar, but also trying not to expect. Besides her, this gorgeous idiot worries that if he grabs Ain's hand, he will agree with Mino's words, and this would mean instant defeat. My man's trying to play it cool, but his swinging hands are practically begging for her fingers. Ain demands to know if Shozo is hanging in there in this chilly cold wind. Shozo throws off his cool looks, saying that he's fine. Ain sees right through this dumbass. However, Ain finds this whole walking thing together not bad at all. Suddenly, her eyes fall onto Shozo's bare hands swinging low like it's asking for her hand. He casually talks about buying loads of meat and stuff. Without a word, Ain grabs his hand as they walk side by side. Shozo thinks of going home and boiling the pot. At Saito Clinic, the Sato's power couple once again tells their turning young again story to Takahiro. The nurse's head is whacked out to witness such a miracle. Takahiro, at his wit's end, claims this younger couple to be his parents. Being a doctor, Takahiro's mind rolls with a million questions, but he starts with the basics. Shozo and Ain replies that they feel absolutely fine. The doctor and nurse decide on a full body checkup to make a full report. Checking out Ain, Takahiro notices her rapid pulse and shallow breath is totally gone. He wonders if this really happened. Afterward, Takahiro declares to give their results on a later date as they're done for today. In their old age, Takahiro once informed the family of finding liver cancer in Grandma Ain right after her recovery from gastroenteritis. Takahiro busted his butt, becoming a doctor, all to save his mom. He worked overtime to find out what was wrong and how to deal with his mom until he had to refer her to a good doctor. That doctor delivered her anti-cancer treatment and tests. He worked overtime, grinding through sleepless nights, only to watch her grow weaker every day. Even then, she would show up late at night with food, her quiet way of saying that she's here. Now seeing Ain healthy and glowing, Takahiro can't hold back the tears. He knows he may not be the one who turned back time, but he's grateful to see her like this. As they walk home, she gently calls Takahiro her pride. Back in the day, Typhoon Mireille wrecked their apple farm and split their cherished wedding apple tree. But Shozo and Ain weren't the type to give up. Their stubborn love tied the tree back alive. That's how the golden apple grew out of it, flipping their fate. Looks like that apple tree had some serious mojo shaking up their wrinkles. Talk about catching a lucky break. That evening, they decided to split the apple and eat it, figuring it'd be a waste to let it rot after its struggles. Ain swore the apple has this mysterious vibe. Shozo totally likes the juicy nectar. That day, the whole tree disappeared, thanking the old grums. One night, Ain woke up to see the floating hourglass flipping itself back. The next morning, they realized they had the same dream. As they sit together, Shozo casually drops that it's their 58th anniversary. Ain's already hyped, thinking about Shozo's big surprise. Ain already has secretly cooked red rice last night just to be safe. She marches to the fridge and finds a cake waiting. Shozo, with her red ride in hand, smirks. When she asks why he lies as always, Shozo explains that doing this only to her. Just like that, they dig in together and enjoy this. After finishing primary school, Shozo, this gorgeous man, straight up drove headfirst into the working hassle class. Then he demanded to know if Ain had attended one of those fancy high-class schools in Tokyo. For a short time, Ain claims to have attended a prestigious female academy, a practical dreamland. She had unlimited rice, a sink that never ran dry, and the kind of comforts city folk always take for granted. But then came the war, taking it all away. Ain found herself stranded by the roadside and forced to return to the countryside. Working in the mud, she felt the suffering to her bones until one fateful day, Shozo came into her life. At that moment, Ain realized that it wasn't so bad. Shozo teases her, betting she could have had anything in Tokyo. But Ain knew the one thing she truly desired wasn't there. Plus, she won't spill that secret. Shozo's curiosity is bursting, asking her to spill it already. Moving on, Shiori brought over her dad's new anti-dementia tool. Shozo, with his scruffy face and old-school pride, squints. He bets this thing just makes a plip-plop noise through the window. He remembers games like Menko, Bigoma, and tag games. Meanwhile, Shiori fires up her PlayStation and Ain's holding it this time. The zombies from Resident Patty pop up on the screen. Grandpa and Grandma nearly jumped out of their seats. They didn't see this coming and got caught off guard. Things got real when the old man in the game stopped them in their tracks to warn them about the danger ahead. Both Shozo and Ain freak out. Then, they retrieve a glowing herb, and Ain is convinced that thieves might come to snatch it. His jaw hit the floor when the game's character powered up with it like a total boss. On the other hand, Shiori believes that this game is way out of the old farts league. She bets that the oldies aren't cut out for games like these. But Ain, ever the wholesome granny, thinks the poor zombies didn't wish for this life. Shozo believes that they better cut their misery short, so he aims for the head. Shiori's jaw drops to the ground with a sudden change of pace. She watches these two unleashing chaos. Ain wields a chainsaw like a pro, and Shozo is picking off zombies with a sniper. A few days later, they announce to had earned all the trophies so far. The next day, Mino bursts into the house, surprised to see Shiori visiting. She jumps onto Shiori, acting overly excited. She's being a real clingy bimbo, swishing poor Shiori. It's been ages since they two faced off. Shiori asks Mino to get off of her, with her usual frosty smile. Turns out these two bunnies are in the same school, but in different buildings. Shiori's still giving the cold shoulder to this bubbly girl, Mino. She recalls Shiori being her solid playmate. Shiori says that everything is in the past now. Not to mention, Mino notices Shiori's big love for Grandpa Shozo and Grandpa Ain, especially after crashing in here. Shiori's close to saying that she is not a fan of their grandparents, and Shozo pops in. Shozo overhears everything. Now the poor guy is glitching harder than a bad internet connection. To top it off, everyone in the room is practically lagging in real life. Mino, trying not to laugh, nudges Shiori to check out their grandpa, whose grandkids officially hate him. Not gonna lie, this grandpa isn't handling this newfound hate really well. Dude's broken beyond repair like an old AC remote. Shozo is holding on to the last shred of his dignity and mutters that he is doing fine. Shiori tries holding Shozo, who's like an NPC stuck in a loop, now smiling when Shiori asks him not to hate her. Shozo is practically glad to have one heck of a long life. Mino's glad to see Grandpa bouncing back to normal. That night, Shozo again had the hourglass dream, the same dream he'd been having since the day they turned younger. Knowing Ain's having it too, he notices themselves having a blast being young again. He still has a lot in mind to do for Ain. To go on an Atami trip with family, and there's a honeymoon trip too, but Shozo doesn't know what life has in store for them. Just then, the hourglass flips back multiple times to wake him up. Freaking out, Shozo wakes up Ain to show he turned old again. Now that Shozo hits the senior discount age, he hates for Ain to look stinky next to an old geezer. He calls their pair chalk and cheese. But then, Grandma Ain holds his shoulders and drops the truth bomb to Shozo. She states that she fell for Shozo's Saito, old or young, doesn't matter. It hits him like a ton of bricks that he has been tripping over this whole age thing for no reason. With a dramatic pause, he talks about being ready for the Atami trip just this way. He refuses to give his life up because of old age, as he's still young for this world. Next time at the clinic, Shozo shows off traces from his young age in his matcha muscles. Takahiro mentions that Shozo's kidney and liver showing signs of aging now. Takahiro's chill about Shozo, but he's like Grandma Ain is all good for now, but if she starts aging, they're going to be out of nice things to say. Takahiro worries about her sickness relapsing. She wonders if Shozo can score another 70 years, and by then, everyone else will be gone. For that, Ain doesn't feel like dying alone, so Ain snuggles up next to her old man. Takahiro is like, this whole thing gives off serious grandpa-granddaughter vibes. Back home, Mino's quick to throw shade, shouting that Grandpa's fast-tracking back to old age. Shozo flexes, talking about his still buff biceps. Then, Yoshiaki throws in the challenge to win an open bath at the Atami trip. He challenges Shozo for an arm wrestling match. With the power of a pervert, Shozo wins it. Ain knew that the pervy old man had it in him. Afterward, Shozo's noticing the old fart's gruesome glares at them. They must be judging that these two aren't together. Ain asks Shozo what color he likes, and this guy picks red, before sliding away from her. Shozo finally mans up and says that they better pretend not to be a couple in public. Even the seller mistakes Shozo for being Ain's grandpa, but Ain comes up to correct him that Shozo is his husband. After that, Ain comes clean that she just hates to be anything other than his beloved wife. Then Shozo apologizes. She holds his coat and walk home together. Moving on, Grandma Ain's favorite mame dafuku, their everyday snack since they turned young again until now. Shozo notices Ain won't touch these in front of him. Shozo's afraid of getting diabetes again. Trying to confront her, Ain happily mentions feeling full and would try some later. Later that night, Ain spots the golden chance and hits up the drawing room to chug the buns down. She's enjoying every bit of it. Considering Shozo's health declining, she knows the old man loves sweets too. Ain just couldn't bring herself to munch off of dafuko in front of him. Suddenly, Shozo catches her red-handed with a stuffy face. That's when he reveals that Ain's stuffed face when eating dafuku is the best medicine. My man's acting all tough, but deep inside, he's melting like crazy. Now two seniors grabbing snacks late at night like sneaky teenagers. After losing her parents, young Ain ends up stuck with her mom's grumpy relatives. Her dad was loaded, but his smug vibes didn't sit well with her mom's relatives, so that pretty much ices poor Ain out. To top it off, she couldn't even crack their thick accents and their winter hit harder. Tokyo Girl is the oddball in town, and people treat her indifferently. The relative's house felt like a prison, so she would sneak off to chill at the shrine. One day, Shozo shows up, feeling a lot curious about this lonely girl. To come up to check her out, he mentions growing apples nearby. All of a sudden, Ain's stomach let out a hungry growl, and Shozo got the fix for it. Though Ain's not a fan of this place's sweet and salty food, she tries asking Shozo to clear out before someone spots him with her. He brushes off her awkward hints at her bad reputation as a Tokyo dweller. Then he offers her some of his lunch, the rice cakes. Shozo straight up said that he didn't care, as he wouldn't let a whole village fail to help a lonely girl. At that moment, Shozo's salty cakes felt like a warm hug. Ain felt Shozo's kindness. A few days later, Ain cuts to the chase, asking Shozo's reason for popping up here every day. Shozo says his house is near the shrine, and he is just curious. Looks like this girl, Ain, sitting here all cool, but in her head, she could spot the dude a mile away trying to put off his shady act all over again. Man wouldn't cut his crap and just quit it. Ain rolls her eyes and asks him to quit acting shady before people spot him here. But Shozo casually sits next to her like it's totally normal. She hushes the little dude to get down. Then Ain studies his restless, goofy face and is sure he is no scholar or Prince Charming. She wonders just how far this dude's willing to melt her down. Now at the present moment, Ain admits this old man melted her heart after all. Meanwhile, Shozo's been dreaming of that hourglass again, plotting to flip it back to surprise Ain. The next morning, Shozo, turning young again, is ready for this grand reveal, but all Ain does is ask him to fix his hair. Shozo's face drops. He was hoping for a bigger reaction. Later, Ain nervously asks if they're immortal. Shozo explains that some sand leaks out, so their youth rewind button only has a few more years left. Without missing a beat, he promises to stick by her side forever. Touched by this, Ain hugs and softly thanks her silly old man, talking about how those hefty imported cars swarming in Tokyo City where his old countryside could only get K cars and K trucks. Talk about this boy's priorities. Imported cars as majestic as flying carpets are a no chance in this countryside. Not to mention healing the bubbled heart of this poor high schooler. And that's all anyone needs here. These two are entering the field of apple trees with their innocent chit-chat about sports cars. Not to mention, pointing towards the snow-capped mountain through the orchard, with all these gravel roads, there's no chance of it happening. Not only that, getting some imported cars up here would get those guys in trouble, especially with no maintenance in the area. All of a sudden, these two happen to run into this pure beauty, Grandma Ain, who asks if these two have a minute. Turning as red as apples around here, these two boys nervously crackle as they say yes while asking how they can help her. Not gonna lie, seeing a pretty young lady would send shocking jitters to anyone's spine, but having a pure blissful angel like Ain's son could send them out of this world faster than a rocket. Getting close to them, she shares how this area will soon be sprayed with chemicals tomorrow. Thus, she says if these boys feel like their brains are melting, then she prefers they go for some detour. Not to mention, the fresh air has been around for quite a long time. This way chemicals will not find a way inside them. Nervously chuckling, these two young schoolers thank Ain's son for this life-saving information. That's our Ain's son, going about her day and saving lives. Yet again, Shuzu would die every day to see her. Out of nowhere, Shozu's son enters the scene and notices the two boys who frequently visit around here. Noticing that jacked-up red truck with a jaw dangling on the floor, they hear Shozu's son wishing them safe travel home. Though silence hangs heavier than the elephant in the room, the boy talks about Ferraris existing in the countryside. Afterward, Igarashi had it with Shouta and was close to having his nerve burst like a balloon. Thus, like a spark close to an explosion, he mentions to Shouta that he knows about asking him for some storehouse cleaning workers. But too late, cause this spark has gotten some ignition. So Shouta, feeling a foot in his mouth, watches his grandpa burst into flames when he sees Shuzu as an option of all people. After a while, Igarashi settles down and shows Shuzu the storehouse on the second floor. This dusty area is packed with more bugs and rats than things that his dad and grandpa gathered. Flashing back from tray tables with carved legs in wooden boxes to war fans with the Takada family crest. A while later, Shuzu is about to doze off when Shouta shares a crazy thought of this storehouse being one big treasure chest. With holding a crazy amount of things that could own up to some good money, Shuzu expects nothing better than this major landowner. A few seconds later, he is wrapping a bag, off to throw it all out, and this is where he asks Igarashi if he seriously would want to dump these all. Hence, that cranky old geezer says yes that comes out laced with a hint of spite. Turning around to continue his work, he explains how this sturdy, old-fashioned geezer scares the bejesus out of him. Later on, this boy, Shouta, asks Igarashi if they could hand over the creepy black box lying around here, with no purpose whatsoever. Thus, Shouta did a spit take when he watched Igarashi give away the green signal to dump whatever was left in the storehouse. All of a sudden, his eyes shockingly fall on that creepy black box. Thus, Igarashi takes a good long look at that box, reminiscing about some gold memories connected with it. While Shouta asks Shuzo for some explanation, who is smiling at Igarashi, paying his memories a great respect. Hence, he shares that it is Nagamochi, probably belonging to his grandma, the Sako-san, like a part of her bridal trousseau. With a warm caress over it, Igarashi begs to have some time alone with it to decide whether to keep it or not. Strolling away, these two guys go on to check the first floor, leaving the old man alone with his memories. Afterward, calling the Kitamaki Board of Education, Shouta shows the need to consult about the protection of cultural assets. At a loss for words, this guy, Shuzu, is finding Shouta rather competent, while Shouta is trying to book some checkout advisors to look at his antique treasure. Not gonna lie, this little boy comes with additional perks, including dealing with the business way up in his field. Or maybe he is just trying to butter up Mino's grandpa, wiping away his sweat in a scorching heat that is making his skin shimmer. Shuzu lets out a long sigh after moving away all of the stuff outside. Besides him, Igarashi talks about moving the stuff he is keeping for this store specifically while leaving his dear old black box inside. Upon asking, this old geezer talks about getting this storehouse to crumble down faster than the plumber's fixing a centuries-old sink, especially when his sons refuse to take over the family business and farms and continue to live their advanced lives in some towns. With no artisans in sight, he talks about the only option he has is to get some sweet closure before it gets over for him. A while later, Shouta shared about not being sure about living in this area at this point. However, with a determined glint, He is sure about one thing as he tells Shuzu when desiring to become a pro soccer player in Tokyo someday. Out of nowhere, within an earshot, Igarashi hears his grandson talking about his grandpa's lands that he protected so far, he wouldn't mind living there either. Thinking about being a soccer player, a businessman, and a farmer, no matter what happens, he believes his existence started from these very lands, so turning his back on them feels sort of a sin. He shares how he would love to bring life to these lands. Thus, Shuzuo sees Igarashi burst in silent tears as he cancels the plans of demolishing anything. Afterward, this girl, Shiori, checks on the university's public library wing always on her day off, just to get the gist of being a student here. But oh well, these are just some fancy words put all together. Reality is rather harsh, a head dumping down with zero motivation to begin with. Flashing back to yesterday, she remembers muttering something mean to her grandpa. Dumping down her face, she thinks about her blunt refusal to keep him as her tutor when he didn't even go to high school to begin with. Out of nowhere, Shiori hears some girls gossiping about some handsome guy coming up in this library, only to find her own grandpa looking for books. Thus, she decides to ignore him to get over this awkward situation. With her spying tactics, she transforms into a shadow lurker to figure out what he is up to. Suddenly, she spots some high school textbooks piling up on his table as he takes notes, while she thinks of it not making any sense. With that, she remembers Grandma Ain mentioning how he always wanted to go to high school, but he couldn't. Moreover, Shiori now has a great equation in her head, making her think if the odds were in his favor, would he have excelled at it? Back at her own desk, she is stunned to grab this motivational boost from none other than her own grandpa. Up to this point, lots of people have pushed her towards study, but she believes none had this much effect compared to his. Later on, awkwardly playing over her phone, Shiori thanks her grandpa for motivating her to be top 9 in her midterms. However, this just catches our favorite guy, Shuzu, by surprise. Afterward, the commotion about the silver-haired couple looks to be an uprising in Manamamachi. Upon asking if she knows anything, Nino, with a nervous chuckle, pretends to be in the dark and leaves for home. Like the noses of hyenas, her friends have already picked up her trail of betrayals. Later on, in an ice cream parlor, Mino rants about her having a tough time in high school. So she thanks Shouta for letting her borrow his smarts and listens about her troubles so genuinely. With that aside, she then talks about knowing the storehouse story and how her grandpa couldn't stop praising Shouta later. Thus she asks if he did some mojo on her grandpa, which he nervously declines. A second later, Mino asks if Shouta admires a marriage like her grandparents. This girl has no concept of going slow. Riding a Ferrari seems to fit her the best. Agreeing that having something like them would be nice, she asks Shouta if he would hear her out some other time as well. Nodding at that, Shouta goes for some restroom time out, while leaving Mino with her thoughts of Grandpa forcing her to stick with him only. After Shouta gains Shuzu's seal of approval, she ponders hard on this situation. On the other hand, Shouta is shocked out of his wits when muttering about how this all is nothing more than anything else. Further on, Mino shares about doing a cafe this year at the cultural festival, leaving him all flustered, Grandma Ain's eyes sparkling with excitement when knowing these two would be alone in school. Besides her, Shuzu mapping it all out in his schedule, he confirms his Saturday for orchard spraying and Sunday for their checkups. Trying to dash her hopes altogether, even her grandma reminds her how she wouldn't think of going all by herself. A bolt from the blue hits his brain circuits. Shuzu recalls the appointments to be rather next week. Playing with her tiny heart, these two lovebirds are having a blast, while playing their old tricks. Thus, they never leave the room bored at all. On the day of the festival, both remember their days of typhoon evacuation and missing out on these riches. With a pink tint, he looks over to find Ain's son all happy as a child with candy, as he gets the gist of her sparkling excitement looking forward to this very day. And this is where it starts, with all the stall students piling up on Ain to try their stuff first. With all this commotion, a high schooler ends up spoiling Ain's shirt. Like it has been 5 minutes inside, and she has already wrecked her clothes for a starter pack. Talk about a first-hand wardrobe malfunction. With a student panicking like a headless chicken, these two lovebirds couldn't make heads or tails of it, with a double whammy on the side. After a minute, the splasher girl tries to make amends while asking Ain to follow her to the fashion design club to look for some change. Later on, with Ain's youth turnover, these girls are designing this beauty with some modern styles. Thus, he thinks about mentioning how many offers for arranged marriages he has personally gotten so far. Upon asking about her time in high school, she adds on about loving music, some koto, shamisen, and piano. Not to mention, Grandpa Shuzu drools over the sight of Grandma In looking like a flower, far out of reach in her times. When they're all done, they invite Shozu's son to deliver their wife back to him, but this time, a rather different. With his popping out of his socket, seeing the wind caressing her beautiful cheeks, Shuzu's jaw drops to the floor faster than a clown's pants in a pie fight. Our beloved Ain's son is all dressed in school uniform after a splashing disaster to her clothes, as Shuzu feels to be thanking the Lord. Moreover, Ain tells how wearing a uniform has taken her back to those times, with her accent naturally shifting to her high school era. However, this guy, Shuzu, scared stiff to the ground, complains of almost losing Ain to this school. As she fills up her mouth with all those delicious-looking treats, Shuzu is daydreaming while staring at his gorgeous wife. About to tease her, he asks if Ain's son particularly likes someone, but her response leaves him shocked to his wits as she straight up refuses to have any interest whatsoever. And this is where her chuckle breaks all the high school character she is trying to keep. She then burst out with laughter, seeing Shuzu trying to use the old school tactics to win her over. Afterward, finally arrived the maid cafe presented by none other than their granddaughter, Min of Seitu, who is looking like a perfect doll in that costume. Not to mention, Shuzu too is having a rich crowd trying to pour some tea for his comfort, while the other maids are trying to butter up Shuzu before Ain's son, teasing him for almost looking like Mino's boyfriend. Although mentioning the lack of deserving commotion here, they share about how the class third is taking all the limelight with the help of their guardian's authentic ramen hype. However, Shuzu looks to be disappointed in seeing adults at play here, even though these guys have regular male customers coming into this cafe. After a while, Shoto lets a long sigh upon not finding any means to attract some ladies to their cafe, while ignoring the obvious answer to his problem. With his hair all rustled up in confusion, Mino threw some heavy curveballs at her grandpa when thinking loudly if there could be anyone attracting some girls over here. Thrown for a loop, even Grandma Ain jumps on this ride, telling about how she would love someone like him waiting on her. With all the creepy stares piling on him, this lad has no chance but to bow down in defeat. Hence, all the commotion bubbling up in this cafe room caused the class third question their reputation. Looks like having a crazy hot butler is what all needed so far in Mino's maid cafe. Later on, In is going through old pictures with Shuzu over the high school board, thinking he would have been here too. But suddenly, Shuzu closes her mouth shut as he tells her not to worry about it anymore. Flashing back to his scum of an old geezer, he remembers him reminding him about his family values as the first son of Satis. Torturing him into giving up on his dream, he talks about wishing it would have been the other way around sometimes. However, he assures that he is glad that it happened the way it did. And the best part is if he went to school, he would have never met Ain's son. Not to mention, the first time their photo was taken at the deserted Jinja. He mentions this all as proof of his existence by her side. Moreover, no matter what, Shuzu confesses that he would have chosen her over anything. Turning bright red, she shows how this is all being recorded. With that said, this is their cue to leave these premises. Afterward, it turns out, Shoto looks to be pissing his pants over inviting Mino to the bonfire with him. Watching her from outside, he sees her grandma feeding her delicious treats. Handing it over, she asks if Mino is going to the bonfire at all. Upon asking, she claims to have no one to go with even if she does. Lost in his thoughts, he jumps a mile high, noticing Shuzu standing right next to him. Reading the situation from this far, he runs to take Ain's son home like a Ferrari on the highway, Shuzu giving away a thumbs up. This is the signal Shoto needed to ask her out for a bonfire. Later on, a sudden strange feeling switched her back to who she was when she tried those uniform clothing. However, in the government office, they have to shift their appearance right to normal. But she ends up tripping over the hourglass, almost shattering it. The next day, Grandpa Shuzu wishes her good morning, only to be left bewildered on seeing Ain with much darker hair. This girl, Sasaki Ain, is ranting about not knowing where she is and who Shuzu is, and especially not recalling being this young to be called grandma. Today, Ain's tripped over maybe because she won't remember a single thing of her past. Not to mention, her hair turned super black. Chozo notices Ain's memory roll turned young again too. Now Ain's having a hard time grasping this concept of having lived a century alongside the old man. Her wedding ring gives off a few clues, but Ain demands that Chozo propose to her again to rewind her memory. Chozo sees that Ain's got a lot to process after this surprising event. He bets that eating would be a nice way to start things over. She's baffled by this rice cooker machine who's completely out of her mind. Shozo then puts out their feast of leftovers, and Ain looks relieved to see Shozo praying. This time traveler Granny is super hooked on the new sauce bottle. Next, Ains feels weird to see the head of the family doing chores. Considering Shozo's dad's nasty back record, Shozo chooses to turn around for good. He lets her know that he let Grandma handle the cooking chores mostly, as she's super bad at those. Ain stares at Shozo's face like dead serious about having married this dude long ago. He unveils their time together at the field. He talks about Ain working alongside him in the field. That way, Shozo talks about not chugging down booze alone after a hard-working day. Hearing it all, Ain realizes that times are swiftly changing now. Shozo points at always being like this, but having a tough time calling for compromises. Ain notices that this has gone by for a longer time. Not to mention, Shozo isn't looking for praise for his efforts on the house. Up next, Grandma Ain is super impressed by the wrapping paper. Later that night, Shozo talks about the hourglass turning, which is weird for Ain, who sees it as not making any sense. Setting up their footing, Shozo clarifies that her good night's sleep would clear it up. The next day, Shaz turns super young to blow Ain's mind. He tends to ask if Grandma Ain had the hourglass dream. Being a total mess, Ain is in great shock as nothing makes sense to her. She asks if it's really Shozo Saito, feeling not sure at first. She can't believe the dude turned young overnight. Shozo asks if this kick-started her memories, and now she remembers anything of her past. Ain says sorry for his wasted efforts. That takes him by surprise, so he feels sorry to startle her. To see his back, Ain knew she had no memories of his looks or voice, but she wonders why is there an aching to feel his pain of loneliness. Moving on, Shozo lets Ain see their family album full of kids and grandkids. Shozo talks big about their grandkids turning up like the cutest pups. She wonders if they all would be shocked to their bones at their mother losing all the memories. All of a sudden, they hear Mino blazing into the wind and coming inside. Shozo trembles in fear. He just recalls Yoshiaki's family visiting today. Ain quickly gets into the game to act as their grandma for today. She asks Shozo to back her up. Even if Ain's zero memories of her grandkids or kids, she believes that a mother's love transcends time, even if memory fades. She believes that a mother must not let her children cry. Afterward, Mino's super shocked to see Granny's hair turning black, and Ain's acting game begins. However, Ain's oddly peachy behavior is weirding out everyone. Shozo casually drops Ain's old talks about being in a high-class school in Tokyo, especially after how Ain tried out the uniform at Mino's school. Listening to this rubbish, Ain turns super grim at her future self to pull off such a shady thing. She wonders what her future self be doing. Mino likes Grandma Ain's polite notes, talking about her little young world. Ain notices this kind girl to be her grandkid who loves her grandparents. She couldn't help pulling Mino in for a tight hug. Yoshiaki, probably jealous, asks his mother to let Mino go, but Ain refuses to do so. Later on, Ain's cutting vegetables like it's a full-blown war on her turf. Turns out this super granny forgot the art of cooking. Considering at this age she had a tendency to do her chores, she bets that she's the laughingstock in the house. Much to his amusement, Shozo digs in to help the poor girl. Ain's surprised to see this man capable of doing anything. Shozo mentions that curry isn't a big thing. Not letting herself quit here, Ain demands Shozo to teach her knife skills. Ain somewhat feels the nostalgic vibe washing over her. Not to mention, yesterday's grandma's food was top-notch and delicious. She wonders what turned her into a new leaf and acts out so much, despite her bad kitchen skills. She figures that it's all for Shozo that she changed so much. Moving on, Mino's blabbermouth couldn't help but notice the potato was pretty big. Later, Yoshiaki's good grades and his upbringing got him a great job. But now's the good luck running out. He informs the parents at his company going bankrupt if this keeps up. With the sub-branches shutting down real soon, he has got the worst-case scenario brewing in his mind. Shozo asks him to take over the apple farm business, but Yoshiaki doesn't want to trouble his parents at this age. He's sure to figure out something. He believes that if working hard fails, he will work twice as hard to make amends. However, In tries to burst his bubble that working hard isn't the option here. She believes the scummy boss would eat up his hard work, so it's important to let loose and rest too. She says to Yoshiaki that he feel free to escape here anytime. Thus, In lets this big baby know that no matter what, Yoshiaki's still their son. Up next, the booze drilled into Yoshiaki's head starts venting out about the swine piece of the boss messing him up. In sure this son doesn't look like her at all. Shozo adds that Yoshiaki's clear-cut image of his grandpa. While Shozo's busy laying out futons, the drunkard son caught Ain's secret. He's calling strong bets over Ain not being his mom. He explains that her appearance and glances give off a different vibe. However, she straight up looks like from his childhood. He points out that her heartfelt talk reached out to him even then. Suddenly, Ain lets out her hand to pat Yoshiaki, like good old times. On the other hand, Ain is damn sure that she is no match for her own son. Afterward, Shozo practically tries to rewind Ain's memories, which might be becoming a pain in the head. He takes her to the site where they propose, considering this might ring the bell after all. But Ain believes in the somewhat practical showdown. She demands Shozo to reenact the whole scene, which would jumpstart her memories. Sitting next to each other, Shozo reveals to Ain her first hand grabbing. This cranky granny's quick to kill if this whole thing is a lie. Looks like Shozo's got this secret mission to charm Ain, and he's totally failing the script. But honestly, it's getting the old puppy begging for snacks vibe. She slides her fingers in with Shozo, wondering if she actually pulled this off in the first time. Chills run down her spine. Ain denies ever doing that. Now the following is an awkward walk home together. At Hirosaki Medical School Hospital, Ain sees her big sis, who has grown super old with time. Ain finds this time of age totally cruel. After knowing her sister's alive, she rushed back here to see big sis, who only remembers their mother. She bets that she can't turn to anyone. However, Shozo's silence game is going hard. She wonders if Shozo's trying to say that she isn't alone. But Ain's totally used to feeling alone. Holding his shirt, Ain's pouting and muttering that being alone sucks. However, Shozo desperately wants to take a leak as he can no longer stand the pressure. Afterward, Ain spots Big Sis lurking around a piano. Considering how she loved piano at her age, Ain couldn't fight the urge to play it for her. All of a sudden, her Big Sis follows through with her eyes open and starts singing. Everyone's back there is gasping for real. Ain recalls her Big Sis always waiting for her to turn up for piano lessons. Just like old times, Big Sis praises her for being so good at piano. This warms Ain's heart and she tears up. The two sisters go at it for an hour or so. Shozo and the nurse couldn't stop this whole thing and let it happen. Back home, Shozo excuses for having a union meeting tonight. He asked her to eat up before he turned around. She notices that weeks went by without her memories ever returning back. Moreover, Ain recalls that it was her first time ever to be all alone at the house. Not to mention, Shozo's done nothing to win her back. Not only that, Ain hasn't spotted a thing that would make her fall for this goofball. However, Shozo is the one not actively approaching her. She is so sure that Shozo would desert her anytime for being an amnesiac chick. Moreover, Ain's not a fan of Shozo's curry either. This surely doesn't help Grandpa's odds. While he's out running errands, Ain confesses to feeling uneasy at home. However, this just hits her. Ain recalls the endless teachings of Shozo in past weeks, and now she knows their way around the house. However, Ain doesn't get why she's feeling a bit weird. This just hits her. Ain's expecting Shozo to turn up soon. This feeling of longing is something so new for Ain that he is missing the old man. She confesses to herself that it's easier to see Shozo's worth next to her. Although Shozo, this gorgeous goon, swears on never leaving the side of Ain at any cost. All of a sudden, the crack in Granny's hourglass heals up. She recalls proposing to Shozo at the age of 16 as a joke. But that made Shozo turn up at the shrine every day, though her relatives were on bad terms with Shozo's family. Ain got shunned inside. Shozo begged for days to let them have an official relationship. Then the time to face off came. Ain was horrified to spot Shozo covered in bruises. He talks about having a fight with his dad. Later, Ain fell super ill and Shozo paid all her bills. Ain calls this whole thing a waste of his efforts and time. But then, Shozo, with a soft look in his eyes, simply says that he loved her. Not gonna lie, my man, Shozo, just hit his woman with the ultimate I love you with soft eyes and everything. That's literally game over. He bets his life on keeping her happy in her unhappy years, even if it means choosing her for himself. That way, he kept his promise. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. It's Shozo, and Ain bolts to him like she depends on it, feeling like a total fool for demanding a proper proposal. Without a second thought, she throws herself into these arms, holding him tight. Shozo's like, took her long enough. The old-timers, Shozo and Ain, are all hyped for their Tokyo Atami Gourmet tour. Shozo is keen to visit Akemi, their eldest daughter, while they are at it. Meanwhile, Shota and Mino are chilling at the back, while the old farts are busy planning their honeymoon trip. Ain got this wild idea about taking a sleeper train from Aomori Station. Shozo is spacing out, dreaming of card games and train snacks. But Shota wagers in and drops a big old truth bomb. He calls the sleeper trains a thing of the past that is no more. He mentions having bullet trains in this era that go from Shin-Omori to Tokyo. Dumbfounded, Ain objects that it's 8 hours long distance. But Shota is not budging, telling Granny is 3 hours tops. Shifting gears to Mino, he asks if she is really dragging him into honeymoon planning. Mino, all cool, pat him on the back. She calls him the pro who could totally handle this whole thing, especially because Shota takes Tokyo trips for soccer usually. Shota grumbles, being a cranky Dumbo, but admits that Saito duo can handle Tokyo just fine. Meanwhile, Shozo got this sneaky grin to use watermelon to breeze through the gates. Mina looks at Shota to make a point at how they're taking Suka as watermelon. Shota asks if they have family in Tokyo. Shozo casually drops that they've got an eldest daughter in Tokyo. He mentions Akemi is always swamped with work. Shozo shows the need to have a guy to show them around. He is throwing big hints around the room. All eyes land on Shota, who's sweating bullets. Mino jumps in, saying if Shota is on board, she would be tagging along as well. Ain lights up to have this honeymoon fun double with their grandkids. Meanwhile, Shota's inner monologue is a full-blown meltdown. That's when Shozo sneaks over to Shota and whispers the opportunity in disguise to him. He points at the golden chance of scoring a Tokyo date with Mino before him. Shota's face turns super red, and he thinks of discussing this with Grandpa Haisuke. Shozo tries getting Haisuke's blessing for the trip, but Haisuke shuts him down. Then Shozo plays his trump card, and granddaughter Mino takes the lead. She sweetly chimes in, asking Haisuke if they will need Shota for the trip. Haisuke cracks under the pressure of their bride, yelling that his grandkid already brought the bride home. Shota's officially on board now, through his ears practically smoking like a train's chimney. Haisuke teases the poor guy, asking about their wedding dates. He is not coming off easy. At Wednesday's market with all stores on sale, In picks up the candied sweet potato. Kakshin points at Ain's rare scenes of dropping by around the station. However, In blames it on the city's life changing by the minute. Not to mention, In finds it a little too quiet over here. Kakshin believes that their shop won't last long in this crazy change. Moving on, Kakken hopes Ain gets a lovely ride home. All of a sudden, Ain confronts Kakshin that she doesn't want to be eaten up by the changed times. Thus, this hot granny won't be giving in that easy. A bolt from the blue, Kakken suddenly gets a round of customers buying her sweet potato. Turns out Ain's munching down the freshly baked potato outside, which got everyone's stomach rolling for some. Kakshin is thankful for her. 60 years ago, Shozo is seeing off his friends to make some cash in Tokyo. His friend demands Shozo to hop in if he wants to cash a good load. Shozo is over here feeling like Tokyo just wasn't for him, and always seeing off others. Deep down, Shozo had his desire to go to Tokyo too. Now the time is here. Ain calls Shozo back to Earth at the Shin-Omori station. Yoshiaki has come to settle the kids in and to wish them good luck on this trip. Moreover, Yoshiaki lets Shota know if anything rubs his daughter wrong, but Shota is already aware of it. Getting on board, Shozo blurts out the truth that he hasn't been out of Omori in his life. With a bold look, Ain gives Grandpa Shozo a hand, and he grabs it. She then pulls him inside, while their grandkids scream at the back. The grandkids quickly get the old farts off the train to Hokkaido. Mino points at their sides train they're boarding. Shozo laughs it off, believing that they almost rode to the Seiken Tunnel. Yoshiaki finds the whole thing pretty concerning and worries for their trip ahead. The old-timers are practically off their seats to check out the view of this bullet train. They can't believe that this train basically running on the trail like magic. They're hoping to catch sight of Mount Fuji, but Shota casually drops that it's on a different lane. These two are totally glued to the windows, enjoying this unhinged trip to Tokyo. Mina notices the grandparents not using their Yum face cards here. Turns out that the old fools were itching to grab the senior discount coupon on this train. He points out that their young side would lock them in jail. At Miyagi Sendai Station, the old farts relax back to chill under their hoods. They declare to be napping for a short time. Waking the sleepyheads, Grandpa Shozo and Grandma Ain can't believe Tokyo would come up so easily. All of a sudden, they flipped back the hourglass and turned totally young. Shota's head spinning crazy, and he thinks Mino's grandparents are pretty wicked. At their arrival, the lot is straight up heading to Aunt Akemi's house at Musashi Sakai. Meanwhile, Shota's checking out his grandma at Setagaya. In the meantime, Yoshiaki already informed Akemi what's the buzz in town. Akemi bets Yoshiaki's head isn't in the right place to think their parents could turn young again. Akemi points out that Ain's gradual decline in health won't let her cross Aomori that easily. However, Yoshiaki bets that Akemi's quite sick for herself. After that, Akemi feels pretty pathetic to have a cold, especially when her parents come by for a visit. On her paid day off, Akemi reminisces about the time Grandma Ain would cook porridge for her. She recalls her mom being super kind, but at times of cold, she would practically turn into a saint, feeding her porridge. Akemi felt like she had hit the jackpot back in those days, but now she's sure her spoiled princess era is long gone. Out of nowhere, young-looking Grandma Ain swoops in like a patrol officer, checking Akemi's fever like a pro. Akemi's jaw drops. She is convinced that she's hallucinating. She practically pissed her pants to see Grandma Ain drop dead gorgeous and young. To add fuel to the fire, Mino casually pips up that she's alive and kicking. It took a whole hour for Granda Ain to break down their tuning young again story. Feeling guilty, they apologize for barging in while she's down for the count. Afterward, they all agreed that Tokyo was hitting just right this time. They even snapped selfies with some high schoolers, but Akemi couldn't shake how odd it felt. When asked about Kosuke and others, she reassured them everyone was doing just fine. Mino, always info buff, brings up Akemi's family tree. Marrying Seto Nakata, Akemi gave birth to Kazuki, Megumi, and Shinsuke. Akemi chuckles, mentioning how much they all took after Grandma Ain and Grandpa Shozo. Right then, Kosuke rolls in with his dad, Shinji, and mom, Kazuko. Kosuke nearly short-circuits when he realizes Grandpa Shozo is his dad's spitting image. Soon enough, this fun group got into all sorts of fun and games, laughing off their bums like kids. Meanwhile, Mino and Shota ditched the family buzz to go sightseeing, while the old farts took the walk to Shugamo. Shozo gets crazy over buying belly band, throwing curveballs at the seller. Grandma Ain's shopping like crazy too, until she caught the wind of commotion. All of a sudden, the ladies are going nuts over Shozo's modeling in the field. Ain looks super pissed at this old man. Later on, Grandpa Shozo, with the lover's spark, surprises Grandma Ain with a reservation at Milo. Shozo had something in mind he wanted Ain to try out. He orders parfait, which takes the wind out of Ain and Mino's sails. She worried about their dime, but Shozo asked her to chillax. Ain's ready to split it 4 ways, but Mino tells Grandma to cool off as they get more orders incoming. One bite in, and Grandma Ain went crazy, demolishing the entire glass in one go. Shozo just stood there, jaw on the floor, seeing her admit defeat. But hey, watching her devour it like a champ is totally worth every penny. Not gonna lie, Grandma Ain chugged it down in a hole, like a full-on beast girl. Up next, they turn up over the photo booth place to get a few clicks of their trip together. At first, the old couple takes absolutely boring photos, and Mino turns them down. Thus, Minnie takes the heat to show the old goons how it's done. She pulls in Shota and poses like cute teens on their first date. After that, Shota's totally mute, staring at their photo. Shozo's glad to be here in Tokyo, especially to live the day to see this. Thus, Ain and Shozo give this thing a whirl, pose with their hands, and write stuff down. The results weren't too bad, but Mino rolled in a big group photo for the last. Grandpa turns in Kosuke's present for old weird tops. 1 second, Kosuke's bouncing off in excitement, and the second his hopes tarnish into bits. Akemi's second son, Shunsu, clarifies that Kosuke wants modern top blades. Thus, Grandpa challenges Kosuke to a B-blade battle to win his top favorite gift. Kosuke's hyped up, and he rolls with his top blades, but Grandpa's old weird tops kicked his blade out of the ring. Ain eyes Shozo, and he excuses for losing control. In the end, Shozo bought him the gift, and Kosuke bounced off like a happy goof. Later that night, Akemi thanks Grandma Ain for help. She remembers Yoshiaki's call for their mother to turn super sick with time, and Takahiro handling the mess. She wonders if Grandma Ain thinks Akemi abandoned her after moving to Tokyo. Bawling her eyes out, Akemi believes that she never did anything for Ain except worry for her. Ain pats her like old times, telling her nothing can fall apart. Meanwhile, Shira forgot the whole house is on the Tokyo trip. However, she sniffs the key out, plans to study, and hits home later. Getting inside, Shira's heart gets heavy with the thought that her time with her grandparents won't last forever. Sulking over the couch, Shira thinks of having a family, with no one to spoil her again. She's sure the grandparents won't be here by then and wishes they would come back soon. Suddenly, Ain and Shozo get the grandkids' telepathy network strike. Outside, Shota instructed the old fools that their personality would invite trouble, so they better turn them down brutally. At their first scammer encounter, Grandpa Shozo lost his cool. My man Shozo really can't handle the scammer without blowing his top. The dude's basically exploding like a nuclear bomb. Then, at the thought of having Shozo's cover to let weird hags see it all, Grandma Ain lost the cool this time. At the train, Shota asks, to which Shozo and Ain talk about their weird makeup gimmicks, and 80 years of age scared him off. Shota understands the old fools ruined the mood of the poor guy. Finally arriving at Atami, Mino and Shota's hyped up for this trip. Plus, Grandpa Shozo couldn't help crying to see their dream finally coming true. Grandma Ain joins in with Waterworks, feeling immense gratitude for their kids and their families for making it all happen. They feel like this whole thing is a big old movie. At the Izumo Inn, the owner pays respect to the Saito family arriving for their stay at last. She hopes the guests have an absolutely peaceful time here. Moving on, Ain has the perks of being the daughter of a wealthy man, as she scored a big old suit to crash in for their Atami party. With multiple beds, a full dining, and an open bath, Shota is damn sure this place costs a ton. Shozo points at the open-air bath, the sitting-out opportunity. Suddenly, Grandadine asks Shota if he's alright to share a room with Grandpa Shozo. After serving him tea, Shozo wouldn't let it go. He nicely tells Grandma Ain not to shamefully waste the open-air bath chance. Without further ado, Ain demands Mino to enjoy the large bath together. Poor Grandpa is still throwing up facts, talking about the awesome water flow hitting the right spots. The old grumps felt completely sidelined, their grandkids lost in their own worlds. That's when Grandma Ain leans in with a sly grin and whispers about their secret plan. She is scheming to sneak into the bathtub after the grandkids are fast asleep. Later, as Shozo fills the tub, Shota catches him and blurts that Grandpa must not stay in the cold bath for too long. But Shozo shrugs it off, thinking it's for the best. Up next, everyone's drooling at the sight of the amazing, delicious feast. Grandpa Shozo's soul turns full frost with a weird face intact. Mino and Shota are loving this. Meanwhile, Ain and Shozo are practically crying with each delicious bite. After this, Ain and Shozo enjoy sake together. On the other hand, Shota's worried sick about the sleeping arrangements in case it's their honeymoon trip. He blames himself for ruining their night together as he can't sleep with Mino, so she will crash with her grandma. That's when Mino comes clean that Shinjuku would have scared her to death if he wasn't here. At the times of jerks trying to smooth talk with Mino, Shota would step up to shove them away. Moreover, Ain casually drops her gratitude for Shota, who's the reason for turning this trip into reality. Not gonna lie, Grandma's love for Shota is like a fireworks show, and poor dude's out here turning into a habanero chili, and not sure how to handle the heat. He's a walking tomato at this point. Shota feels this sudden dose of appreciation turning him red. In the meantime, Grandpa Shozo doesn't like to be lonely. Thus he asks the lot to join his style of drinking with their juices. He demands the little ones take a sip, then a second, and then a third. Grandma takes the hint and gets super blush for some reason. Shozo explains that the grandkids wouldn't get a thing of this yet. That's true because they totally didn't get the old man's cheap trick. Later that night, Shota never imagined he would end up sharing a room with Mino of all people. He had mentally prepared to bunk with Grandpa Shozo, but nope. Life throws him off with a surprising turn of events. He recalls trying to have a sane conversation with Ain, but Mino hopped in. She made a good case of not ruining the old couple's honeymoon vibes with such a mood. Now this leaves them here together in one room, and Shota's practically freaking out. All of a sudden, Mino tells this brat to keep it totally secret, or else her dad will burn them alive. Plus, Mino's certain the old farts must be having the time of their lives and have started cuddling by now. Meanwhile, Grandpa Shozo is in the next room, snoring so loudly. Grandma Ain is practically roaring like a hungry tiger at him. Moreover, Shota shares spotting the old man trying to hold Grandma Ain's hand all afternoon. Mino cracks up, declaring these fools to be the newlyweds. She wonders what if the old goons have another baby. Suddenly, Mino demands Shota to call her grandma, as she suddenly wants Grandma's experience. Rolling with the act, Shota coughs up, asking Grandma if dinner's ready. Mino bursts out laughing, calling for her turn. She asks Grandpa to marry her. Without missing a beat, Shota does his best grandpa voice to remind Grandma that they're married already. Laughing it off, Mino mentions Grandpa and Grandma use their real names as well. To mix it up, Shota tries saying Mino, and Mino strangely blushes and calls in for the night. Grandpa's snoring like a bear in hibernation who's just conquered the mountain. Moreover, Grandma Ain is giving him the side eye. She can't believe this pervy old fool is dreaming about her in the bath. She rolls her eyes, muttering the steak to be the real culprit here. She bets that Sake must have fried his circuits deep inside. Also, she feels like she got herself mentally prepared for this. But then she lets him sleep and lets him dream. In the dream world, Grandpa's got one mission, and that is eyeing up his wife in the bath. The pervy old fool is sneakily reaching for the melons, but he slams right into the hourglass. The next day, Ain wakes up the old grumps for today's scheduled fun seawater bath. He's totally freaking out to see. The old man tries his hardest to explain how her marshmallows somehow turned into an hourglass, but Ain's just staring at him, judging him really badly. At the beach, Mino noticed the wild crowd had eyes on her snow-white grandma. However, Mino spots the baldy that's catching Grandma Ain's spotlight. Everyone just couldn't keep their eyes off of this person behind Ain. All the dudes on the beach feel pale at the sight of this muscle monster coming right behind the beauty. Grandpa Shozo's muscle buff scares off all the scumbags off this field. Moving on, Shozo challenges Shota for a race, but Shota's like, the old grumps must hold his horses. Shozo tries pushing the little kiddo by asking if he's gonna lose to a rundown old bone. He believes this lousy loser kid can't have a thing with his darling granddaughter. That surely ignited Shota's hopes for the win. Mino asks Grandma Ain's plan for swimwear, but she turns it down, telling him that she likes collecting shells. Meanwhile, Grandma checks out Mino's hot look and couldn't keep herself from shedding a tear. A bolt from the blue, the whole crowd sees the brawny geezer practically flying through the water stream like a bold fish. Besides him, Shota's trying hard to swim through fast to earn Mino fair and square. Afterward, Shota throws up a rainbow stream, while the brawny old man gloats that Shota's got a long way to go. He shows off his muscle buff with a grin. Grandpa Shozo comes to chill beside Grandma Ain, and both watch the grandkids playing volleyball. He talks about Ain's swimsuit being a total waste, but she mentions liking it in the shade. Besides that, she accepts the fact that she's over 80 now. However, Shozo argues that Ain in a bikini at the age of 80 would still be sick. But that face didn't last long, and he ended up feeling disgusted. Mino and Shota are the crazy lovebirds in the ocean, while the whole beach is filled with the lovesick fools. Grandpa Shozo throws off his big old tantrums to show off his bride too. He hates being the brawny monster. Ain recalls her sick old days when the seaside fun time was just a crazy dream. However, Ain points out that their time here together makes her happy. He gets that. Thus, Ain takes a break to wash off the sand. In the shower, she's dressed up in a bikini to show the old man but gets chickened out at the end. She couldn't help herself walking in such a hot thing. Later, she explains that Shozo saw her through and through plenty of times. Crying like a baby, Shozo spills that it's totally a different thing. But Ain totally forbids letting other men check her out like that. Shota thinks this pair is one sickening sweet thing. Bringing drinks over, Mino spots the sun Kudo thing that is smacking her hyper-aware of Shota. Later that night, Shota and Mino are totally exhausted by this ping-pong table. They let the old bones try it out. Surprisingly, this goes on for another 10 minutes, non-stop. The whole inn has arrived to witness this amazing show. They are noticing this darling couple hasn't moved an inch in their super speed ping-pong rally. Afterward, Ain felt her excitement got her totally sweaty. Now Ain's sitting in Shozo's arms, pretty much okay with his brawny old face. She reminds Shozo about their first time being young again when Shozo wished hard to have the honeymoon trip. She chuckles over something. Upon asking, she explains imagining this whole scene in her old body. Practically, this would mean an older couple trembling as they flirt in the bath. Shozo bets that for an outsider, it's a pretty sick image. Even Ain can't imagine Shozo fondling her saggy melons. The next day, they checked out a jinja near the inn. Ain catches Shozo doing something funny with the wish tablets. Then, Shota and Ain try putting down their wishes as well. Shota wishes for a soccer match success while Mino wishes to have awesome grades. Ain bets that Shozo wrote something funny, and this catches her eyes until Mino catches her off guard. Besides them, Shozo prays hard that Ain doesn't flip it over. But Ain flipped and found Shozo's crazy wish to have Ain as her wife again. Suddenly, Ain realizes the old man felt the same way she did. Afterward, the Kuzunoki tree at the heart of the jinja is over 2,000 years old. Mino reveals that circling the holy tree grows their lifespan by a year. The old farts plan to do 100 lapses, leaving the grandkids to read the wish tablers. As a wish, Shota hopes to come by this place as Mino's someone special. While walking beside her, their hands suddenly collides, racing their hearts while their grandparents scream for great-grandchildren. Sharing it with Mino, Shota mentions coming back here after being a soccer legend only to repay his debt to the land that raised him. He asks if Mino has dreams after high school. Shota falls asleep real quick, sucking out Mino's nightly dream with the thought of the future. Come to think of it, she feels like farming doesn't seem a bad option for a dream. Thus, she kisses Shota's forehead. The next morning, Grandpa Shozo turns young again. Meanwhile, Mino can't keep her eyes off of Shota. She mentions wondering how Shota would look as a grandpa. The girl's getting super crazy, brewing weird thoughts. At the library, a weird Dumbo lost his library card somewhere here. Being a literal angel, Shiori turns up to return the lost card she found under the table earlier. He thanks the girl. Suddenly, Shiori spots the dude holding a mysterious book that catches her interest. That's the mystery behind the legend of turning young again. Later on, Shiori and Satoshi Takahashi end up sharing an interesting story in a cabin. Knowing Shiori is picking the medicine faculty, Takahashi mentions being a sophomore in that faculty. He figures Shiori is studying for the entrance exam, but Shiori's interest is in that mystery book. Shiori asks what's with this book. Satoshi reveals this to be his next research on the old people turning young again, which happens every few hundred years. He is damn sure that there's probably someone around here turning young again as they speak. Shiori's face goes ghost white, turning totally pale. Satoshi catches on that her dad's a doctor, but she drops the bomb that the real reason she is here is for the grandparents. She talks about the grandparents praying hard for the family no matter what, who is basically her family's personal superheroes. She bets that they have saved her and spoiled her 100 times, which is why it's her time to save them. Satoshi asks if she's ever told them this directly. Shiori believes that it would be an awkward way to die. Satoshi is sure that those old fools would cry their bums out after hearing her. Hearing it all, Shozo's crying a crazy stream of tears at the back of the shelf, sobbing like a 3-year-old. The next time Shozo fills in about the whole thing, who couldn't help hugging Shiori, and she has no clue what's up with old fools. Afterward, Mino's dad, Yoshiaki, turns up at his parents' house to share the grim news that Mino's acting up strangely. He spills Mino's late night out strangely, happening even more, with her obsessive need to keep secrecy. Ain believes that girl is reaching that age, but Yoshiaki is convinced she is up to no good. Grandpa Shozo and Grandma Ain are in on this whole thing, believing Mino totally caught the love fever with Shota. Yoshiaki flips, convinced that his sweet Mino's either joining a weird cult or is secretly dating some bona fide criminal. He is practically screaming to his bones like a lunatic, thinking he has lost his pure little angel forever. Ain calmly points out that Mino's doing fine, but that doesn't calm Yoshiaki's thunder. The guy is having a meltdown. He is convinced that his kid probably got smuggled in and dragging into some dark web society. Meanwhile, the old folks are standing there, totally clueless. Ain smirks and drops a truth bomb, that his generation was much naughtier back in the day as compared to Mino's. Yoshiaki looks around like he's just realized the universe is laughing at his bum. With a sigh, he apologized to his parents for giving them a rundown, but this was more of a half-hearted defeat. In Yoshiaki's fight days, Kei Day's the real deal that ended that nonsense period in his life to start a family and get him serious on the road to life. At the apple farm, the two wannabe detectives corner young Ain and Shozo. These fools investigate what happened to the old couple who were always tending to the apple farms. Their jaws practically hit the floor at first. Then Shozo casually drops that their bodies are resting at home after calling in sick. Ain quickly follows up, explaining that they are just filling in for the old couple. At some serious side-eyes, the kids nod like a couple of little detectives closing the case of town and head off. Shozo whispers that there is no way these kids easily let go just now. Later that night, the old fools flip the hourglass to settle the boys' dilemmas and worries. The next day, the two wannabe cool kids show up again, hyped to see the old couple back in action. They leave, excited and reassured. Meanwhile, as Mino hops on her train, Ain suddenly spots her forgotten lunch at home. It hits her like a truck. Her poor granddaughter is now a sad, hungry pile of regret riding the train. Her friend suggests she eats something from the cafeteria. But Mino's making a sour face on losing Granny's lunch. Back home, Grandma Ain's damn sure to reach Mino's school in the rush hour by the train. With Grandpa Shozo practically busy with the truck on the field, she gears up in a full-on Super Granny formation. On the other hand, Mino was turning into a big old sad apple, considering she only visits for a few days and can't enjoy her Granny's lunch. However, the crowd's staring outside as the Super Granny nicks it in time. She commands her grandkid to stop at the next station to get a lunchbox. Later, Grandma Ain became the talk of the train, with her popularity spiking off the roof. Teaching Shiori, Satoshi's tongue rolls into a strange accent, and Shiori is super shocked for a second. He apologizes right away for being a clumsy idiot, considering he was raised in Grandma's hometown. Shiori inside thinks this dude should quit being this conscious of her. She remembers Mino teasing her for having a crush on a guy like Grandpa. Shiori thinks it over, but she's sure not like that type at all. Shiori asks Satoshi's reasons for researching that topic. With a sigh, he thinks Shiori's safe to tell and rolls in his secret for having grandparents who turned young again. Shiori's mind is completely blown by this sudden bombshell. Turns out Satoshi's grandparents stumbled over a tree with a golden apple and hit this amazing jackpot of having their lives turned around. Then, the next day, Hajime Takahashi and Setsu Takahashi become a young, spirited, youthful couple again. For a foolproof view, Satoshi took her to his grandparents' house and asked her to see it for herself. Grandma's hoping Satoshi scored this girl for a bride. She explains having to come and check this place out willingly. Satoshi doesn't understand why Shiori isn't at all in shock. Upon asking, his grandparents talk about chilling, but Satoshi plans to do something for them. Considering his parents divorced, the old fools raised him up to this day. He begs them to let him return the favor as well. Shiori gets that this dude is deep in his research for his precious grandparents, just as she took medicine for them. The old bones believe that Shiori isn't buying their game at all, but Shiori stands up, declaring to believe this whole thing. Moreover, she has something of a surprise and would like to meet them. Shiori asks them to come over to Saito House, and the pair of grandparents have their jaws dropped to the ground. They can't believe that there's a pair just like them turning young again. Opening up juice, Shozo's glad to have a family just like theirs going through the same stuff. Setsu is knees deep to know Ain's secrets of keeping such a smooth skin. But Ain mentions water doing the trick for her. Meanwhile, Hajime teases Shozo for cracking a good-looking piece of a wife, as he believes that his wife isn't cute at all. But Shozo praises that his wife's a pretty gal as well. The old fools are acting like a couple of drunk bums, which is pissing off Shiori. Meanwhile, Satoshi notices Shiori being a cranky hag over the couch, feeling utterly clueless about what's going on. He is happy to see them getting along, especially when they have no one to consult. He bets the old fools must have a lot to vent out. Shiori believes that they will also turn up old married couples just like them. Suddenly, they realize what Shiori just muttered, and Shiori is turning hot red in embarrassment. Later on, Setsu talks about her tale of finally crossing paths with Hajime. During her time as the innkeeper, lots of scumbags hit on her, asking her to get drunk or dance for them. That's when Hajime bursts through the door to rescue her in the next room like a hero. Being a total firecracker, she bets that no dude can beat her husband. That hits Ain deep, and she starts babbling nonsense about Shozo giving his life for her. However, she believes that Hajime is a nice catch. But no way in hell, Ain would accept that her old man is number 2 in the world. Being a fiery lady, Setsu talks a big game about her husband, mentioning that he is pretty smart and considerate. He believes him to be a taciturn man, but deep inside, Setsu lives rent-free in his head. That doesn't shut Ain up. She throws in the hardcore list of Shozo's traits of always helping out with chores and thinking of her 24/7s. Just then, Setsu, keeping the fire up, challenges Ain's husband to finally decide who's the best. Outside, Ain thinks of having a 3-round battle to decide this once and for all. Although the men here don't feel like doing this. Shozo is all talk, revealing that it's just a friendly game where losing doesn't matter. But Ain's face tells it all that no fun in games, he better rig the bloody game into winning it. Without further ado, the scary cat, Shozo, calls Matsunosuke to come up here right this instant. At first the tug of war for the beloved wife, both contestants are having their past memories flash in their minds to strengthen their will to win. However, Ain couldn't get a hold of her emotions and stepped right out of the circle to claim Shozo in her arms. She thought of being victorious, but Matsunosuke declared Saito out of bounds. Up next, Matsunosuke puts down 3 exactly the same dishes, so the husband can figure out which is cooked by the wife. However, Shozo and Hajime can't tell if it's the same or different. But Shozo cracks the code real fast by picking both dishes belonging to Ain. Hence, he wins round 2. After winning, Ain teases Setsu by feeding Shozo with her hand. However, Ain wouldn't let Shozo feed her. After that, the ladies are fighting off to pick the 3rd game. Matsunosuke checks out the heat. Ain casually explains that they just want to flex how awesome their husbands are, that's all. Fired up by their love in the air, Matsunosuke jumps in, declaring their love for husbands won't end this war. He talks about being cool with being the worst husband in town. He declares that if his dearest love is happy, he is golden. His wife overhears the whole speech and falls head over heels for Matsunosuke again. The feast rolls with laughter and love until the clock strikes midnight. The next morning, Shiori approaches Anne, asking her to teach cooking. Anne teaches her the grease stuff on her request, but Anne recalls Shiori isn't a fan of grease food. Jolted by this, Shiori talks about that being a thing of the past now. Grandma smiles, knowing what exactly Shiori is doing, but sadly she won't be around to see that day. The next day, Satoshi ravishes the mean, clueless that Shiori prepared the whole thing. She keeps her secret, calling it a leftover treat. On the TV, a deadbeat student zombie is about to climb out of the TV screen. Shozo casually notices Mino's generation's popular blockbuster movie, Desako. He bets that horror movies have turned up their game over the years. However, he believes the whole coming out of the TV thing is a bit too much. Take a look at Ain. She's praying hard with a salt plate and covers up the screen. Suddenly, In spots a creak through the door and shuts it right up in an instant. She calls in for the night, pulling in drapes, and Shozo falls asleep rather quickly. However, In isn't turning for the night. She had her sleep sucked dry by that movie ghost. Looking at the ceiling, the weird wood face is creeping her the heck out. Taking a stand like a poltergeist possessing her body, she pulls Shozo's hand and tucks herself inside. The next morning, Shozo strangely complains of his left arm feeling numb. Ain believes Shozo is imagining stuff up again. The next day, Mino stops by her grandparents' place to find Ain and Shozo scratching their heads like they are solving the world's biggest puzzle. When Mino asks what's up, Shozo sighs and says that the Takahashi family sent them apple seeds. However, they feel bad that it's too late to grow them and feels wrong to toss out the gift. Mino's eyes lit up as she remembered Shota's talk of the future. She asks Grandpa to let her have some of those seeds. Grandpa's eyes shoot up, and he wonders what Mino is cooking inside. Turns out this bubbly girl already thought of planting one on her birthday next week. Shozo riles up about maintaining an apple tree that lives as long as a human. Mino totally gets the fuss, rambling about how epic it would be to grow an apple tree that lives as long as her. Not to mention, Mino casually drops her secret future plans to take care of the apple farms. That catches the old fools off guard that Mino's the one taking great interest in farming. Tearing up, the grandparents are overjoyed to have Mino thinking over it. She explains that the person he admires is chasing his dream, so she doesn't want to turn up super lame. The next day, Mino gets Shota to help her plant that apple tree. As they finish up, she ties a pink ribbon around it. She blurts out that this apple tree might live and stand tall for years. Moreover, she bets that the kids, primary school, or people might not be here when it's growing high. Maybe the whole town would be long gone by then. She sneaks a glance at Shota. She casually drops that her grandparents had their wedding tree planted here. Shoto, staring at the freshly planted tree, blurts out, asking Mino if he can visit this place again when he is old. Mino freezes for a moment there, as this catches her off guard. Before she can reply, Shota slips that she'd probably be married by then and moves out though. Mino gently giggles, hoping to wait for him. Meanwhile, the old bones overhear the whole thing from afar. Shozo nudes Ain to get the red rice and konbu rolls out tonight. Mino still wonders if that was a straight-up confession. A few years ago, In demanded Shozo to ask out if they could have a Festival Eve vigil this year too. Shozo's totally up for having such a nice thing to please the gods above. He swears to catch up with the town's council president and have a talk about it. He went by the shrine to discuss the matters. Now the Festival Eve vigil has turned up, all the stalls are open. At home, Mino is rocking one of Akemi's old yukatas, given by Grandma Ain. Mino's looking like a total doll in this one. Ain casually mentions it used to belong to Akemi and says that she always wore normal clothes to festivals. Mino doesn't like the odds here, and to think the summer festival would go by without Grandma wearing yukatas. She pushes Ain into finding a spare yukata and gets her dressed ASAP. When Grandpa Shozo checks In out in yukatas, his brain practically short-circuits with a jaw drop. At the summer festival, the village is buzzing with lights, colors, and stalls everywhere. The old pals are hyped up, tossing back sake like champs. Meanwhile, on the porch, In chills along with cotton candy, muttering that Shozo is definitely drinking a pint load of booze tonight. Just thinking of Shozo having fun out there, her chest feels so stiff about having a short end of the stick. She reminds herself that she isn't young inside, and she shouldn't let her emotions get the best of her. All of a sudden, Grandpa Shozo, out of his breath, finally turns up beside the porch, surprising his wife. At the party, the old grumps couldn't believe Shozo took off so early. They all claimed to love his stories of turning young again. Matsunosuke reminds the old dummies here that out of booze, men and women, who he'd be picking tonight. The old farts pick the booze under one breath. Matsunosuke bets that younglings are leaving the party for some reason. Moving on, Shozo nicely took his beloved wife out on a night like this, asking if she would like strawberry candy. Aang gladly turns it down, happily adjusting to this romantic walk with him. However, during the Showa period, Shozo recalls their teaching that every desire is an evil one. Thus, Shozo keeps asking Ain if she wants candy. However, Ain's Asian hag inside wouldn't let herself pay 500 yen for a strawberry candy. He happily buys her a stick, and Ain glows up hard, claiming to eat takoyaki next. Up next, they turn up at the gun game stall, and Ain wants to hit the belly bear that looks straight up stuffed grandpa. Turns out this scummy seller adjusted the prizes based on their weights from years of experience. Thus, to shoot one down, one has to shoot multiple times at one spot to win it. All of a sudden, Shozo throws in his support, backing her up. The seller finds Shozo as serious bad news. Shozo's whole focus is to match Ain's shoot timings. Matching her sync and trigger game, they shoot the belly bear down. Thus, this power couple wins off the cute bear, leaving the seller to cry for the night. Walking out of there, the old fools decide to take a short break, while the ladies spot the cute bear giving off baby vibes. Either one in the lover's game would hit the end first. One of the lovebirds is bound to hit the brakes first, leaving the other drowning in the sea alone. Ain believes that this is how life rolls out as a couple. Then, out of nowhere, the hourglass runs out of sand, declaring her life to be maxed out. Her game's over. At the Joshoku shrine, Shozo asks if Ain is doing alright. Back to the earth, Ain lets him know that she's tip-top. However, she figures out late that her amount of sand wasn't there as much as Shozo, but Shozo is quick to catch the real thing. He asks if Ain heard a voice in her head too. Thus, he comes clean that he will still be having a year apparently. Shozo tends to ask how much time is left for Ain. With a sigh, she leans in on him, revealing that she only has 7 days left. Not to mention, Ain blurts out that she could feel the death lurking nearby for a month already. Holding her tight, Shozo talks about expecting this day would turn around at any point. Ain believes that her life is still a gift, and that she made it this far. Still, at this point, Shozo wishes for a miracle of God to change their lives back again. Out of nowhere, a mysterious force zaps down to swoop Shozo and Ain from this site to some otherworldly place. Shozo and his young self with Grandma Ain sits at a weird smoky place with no idea what's going on. Then suddenly a voice claims to be a deity and is ready to lend Shozo a hand. Totally baffled by this whole thing, Shozo asks why a deity would bother with them. Turns out that they've been keeping the shrine spotless all the years. Without this old couple, the place would have crumbled ages ago, and the deity would have long been forgotten. Thus, she offers to extend Ain's lifespan, but she would need to take someone else's life in exchange. Shozo decides to give up half of his time, thinking she wouldn't forgive him for sure. 15 minutes later, Grandma Ain wakes up, saying she had the weirdest dream of all time. The hourglass was getting full somehow, and there was this warm, fuzzy feeling. Shozo's eyes nearly pop out of his head in shock. He hopes Ain hasn't heard a thing, but Ain is utterly clueless about how much time she has left. She apologizes for worrying the poor old man. On the other hand, he is ready to face the inevitable if his secret gets out, but he just can't let her go alone. This brawny dude wants to ride this wild life with Ain, hand in hand, savoring every minute of this journey together. A long time around, a loving couple lived near the shrine, but famine ate up this place and all the villagers died. Except for the old couple who once served the sacred tree water. That's more precious than life itself. Turns out their wish didn't come true, and they were out cold. A few days later, the sacred tree grew golden apples that filled their bellies and quenched their thirst. The old couple's prayers turned life around in this village, and the shrine's still going by. Moreover, Satoshi paints quite a picture that this village had a famine in the Tenmei era, with talk of the old folks turning young again. Shiori gets super annoyed by this revelation and leaves the dude behind. Shiori decides to head home, but Satoshi whines about just coming in here. Although Satoshi invited her over, but she was hoping to grab a bite and avoid the history lecture. Seeing them, Shiori had the crazy thought to become them deep inside. All of a sudden, Satoshi is chasing her back and forth with a chocolate banana. Without skipping a beat, she takes it, while not understanding what's wrong with her. A week later, Ain can't figure out why she is even alive. Suddenly, In has a serious meltdown, tossing the poor guy aside. She confesses on feeling super scared. However, In confronts Shozo that her heart can't take it to leave him to rot alone. She's low-key accepting her own death, but leaving him all by himself wasn't on her list. She doesn't get why the whole heart-stopping warning came out of nowhere. Shozo reminds the lady that life is not something to pick or change. Then, with a hug, he promises to keep living like it's just another day in the usual chaos, no matter what. Mino shows up all excited for Halloween. She explains Halloween to the old folks that it's all about ghosts, costumes, trick-or-treating, the real deal. She asks if Shozo and Ein are dressing up for the occasion. But Shozo acts too cool, revealing that it's too childish for adults. Mino, being Mino, drops the massive bombshell that adults do it these days as well. Not to mention, this could be dragged in Shota as well. Shozo and Ein see no way out and tend to follow Queen Mino's command of the day. They agree to follow Mino's lead for Halloween. On Halloween night, Mino, dressed as a scary black witch, creeps up to Shota, who is dressed as a cute bear. She borrowed the whole thing from the Maid Cafe costume collection house. They wait eagerly for the grandparents to show up in their costume and blow their minds. Mino is damn sure that she has won the costume game. She is giving off a sinister laugh. When Shozo and Ein finally appear at the door, the trick-or-treaters are fully shocked at their wits. Shozo is a full-on horror serial killer, ready to chop off children. Meanwhile, In is giving off the twisty vibes of a tragically dead widow, luring into the dark corners. These two are blowing off spooky vibes. Mino's mind is blown, and she passes out cold right there on the rocks. Late at night, a car cruises down the dark road, trying to see the urban legend of this southern road. They are expecting to run into the infamous devil pickup truck of the southern mountains. Blondie is convinced that it's a ghost doing the dirty work behind the scenes. They believe that this truck has a serious reputation for trashing anything in sight of it. But then, the scumbags roll up and throw their cigarette butt into the apple farm. They had no idea how big a mistake they just made. Shozo is not having it. He races his pickup truck and chases them down the hill. Back home, Shiori's curious why Grandpa is so late, and casually says that he has been patrolling the apple farms lately. She mentions Shozo making sure no apple thieves screw with them. After all, those farm thieves are a real pain in the head, with all the weird biker gangs around the town. Meanwhile, Shozo is in full beast mode, racing his pickup truck like he's some high-class racer. The scumbags in the car try to shake him off, but Shozo shows off his mad drifter style, throwing them off their game. Their mind is totally blown to see a pickup truck matching the speed of their car. Shozo surely shows who's in charge of her. At Suzuki Motors, Shozo cannot help but thank Tetsuji for his mad tinkering skills, though he jokes that if he goes any faster, the apples might get smooshed. Tetsuji, all proud of his inventions, casually drops that he has worked on legendary cars like Hakosuka Z and Toyota 8 just to build Shozo a custom pickup truck. But he has kept the engine a total mystery. Now the suspense is finally over, as Shozo is riding a big beast that's scaring off the scumbags. He tells his bro that they better hit home before the devil makes a turnaround. The next day, the whole town is buzzing with news of two idiots sobbing their hearts out. They claim to have seen the ghost of the pickup tree screwing with them. No one's sure if they actually spotted the ghost or just got scared out of their wits by Tetsuji's mystery car. Today, Matsunosuke has decided that it's the perfect time to give an air gun lesson on his private property. The old fool kicks things off with some classic gun rules. At first, he makes it pretty clear not to shoot off other people or any barrels are off limits. The second rule is to not kill off any bird or animal that would violate animal rights. Matsunosuke is all about keeping it legal. Dude's keeping it clear that it's pest control, not a wildlife massacre party. The old hags are totally ignoring Matsunosuke's efforts and can't help but take their eyes off Shozo. He's shooting off cans like a pro, pretty much stealing Matsunosuke's spotlight off his feet. All of a sudden, all the grannies are loading their hands with guns, ready to shoot off all the cans. Not to mention, the grannies build their rules to make it even harder for them to score, considering the red can is off limits. After blowing off the cans, Shozo praises the grannies for being a total pro at this. Meanwhile, Matsunosuke and Kokichi check out the old hags vibing really hard. They bet the lad must be tired of having pests eating off his land, so he built the Ninja Turtles of old age. The rain starts pouring hard. Shota and Mino, soaked up wet in the rain, take the Josuka Shrine's roof for shelter. They are sure to skip the farms today. Ever the gentleman, Shota lets Mino have her coat, considering he's used to having it cold at his club. She thanks Shota, calling him really kind. All of a sudden, the lightning strikes at their foot, scaring the crap out of them. In no time, the crybaby Mino took hold of Shota, hugging him real tight. Suddenly, they break it off, while Mino turns to call Grandpa Shozo. Just then, Shota's voice starts glitching, and he asks Mino to take a look at this holographic sight of the past, freaking him out. These two Dumbos watch Grandpa Shozo and Grandma Ain keeping each other cozy in the rainfall of their time. At home, Ain and Shozo enjoy watching the heavy pour through the window, reminiscing about the old times of their youth. Ain wonders if Mino and Shota are doing okay. Shota bets that it's the image of their youth. Young Ain reveals her family threatening to disown her if she doesn't quit talking to Shozo. Shozo blurts out that his dad pushed him to meet someone else yesterday. Shozo believes that today might be their last meeting of a lifetime. Ain believes that if everyone knew he had done the deed with someone already, they would all back off eventually. Thus, Ain pins Shozo down to the floor, grabbing this first come, first served dish. Poor Shozo begs Ain to quit it as it's the shrine and the god would incinerate them into ashes. Mino's inner scream echoes inside, but she hides Shota's eyes right at the time Ain digs in. Ain is not going easy at Shozo, trying to mark her property. Those two ran off the porch and came back soaked in rain. Drying up her face, Mino asks Grandma if they frequently checked out the Joshuk shrine. Ain reveals to be going with Grandpa Shozo a lot after their first meet-up. Thus, Mino and Shota borrow Yoshiaki's room for the day. Meanwhile, Ain yells at Shozo for blowing their secrets to grandkids about the shrine. But Shozo swears on not ratting her out. On the other hand, Mino comes out of the shower, but Shota thinks of having it at home instead. He can't fight off this awkward heat after what went on. Not to mention, Shota feels like the horrors of the shrine drilled inside his mind like a fresh memory. He can't even think of forcing it out on Mino, who would definitely screech his skin off. Just as he turns to take a look at her, Mino is already glancing at his side. Long ago, Ain spilled the beans that Mino's time had awesome perks like dating or being pretty. She points out that while the adults often claim the past was better, the truth is that Mino's time has it easier. Ain lays out that no matter what, with enough determination and courage, Mino's time has unlimited possibilities in stock. Thus, Mino decides to break off this deafening silence by pointing out Shota's heroics to shield her in time. Mino confronts Shota that the stunt made her really happy. Suddenly, she cutely drops her head on his shoulder, almost about to spill something, but suddenly she takes a stand, sniffing off something's off. Meanwhile, Shozo couldn't keep himself from sneakily hearing out what's the fuss inside. Mino catches Grandpa Shozo and Grandma Ino red-handed, trying to play I Spy. Even with loads of excuses, she locks up the room, while Shozo and Ain cry hard for her to open up. One frosty night, a granny peacefully dozes off on an empty train. Suddenly, the ticket collector gently shakes her awake, announcing they had hit the last station. Granny, feeling depressed, takes a good look at the train running empty like a ghost town. She asks what's with this hollow tunnel. The collector sighs, explaining that cars have taken over the road and trains are so last year, barely having a purpose. A few days later, Ain flips the script. She rounds up a gang of lively old ladies, and they all board the train together. This throws off the ticket collector. Turns out Ain had grouped together old hags and booked a meet-up place at the main station. Thus, riding the train sometimes is fun. Boarding the train, Ain believes the city is still alive, so the train won't be stopping right now. As the train chugs along, Ain bets that they will keep riding this train no matter what. This spirit warms up the ticket collector. One day, Ain and Shozo are stuck in the traffic because the guy at the front is crapping his pants to drive in the snowstorm. Thus, Shozo takes the initiative to drive the back cars out of their misery. The crybaby dude hastily follows the godsent pickup truck. Ain figures Shozo knows his way around the snow-covered road for more than 60 years. In no time, they arrive inside the city, and the crybaby dude finally thanks the pickup truck dude for saving his day. The next day, these old fools get an off-road truck after heavy snowfall. Now on the outside, Ain is breaking a sweat to shatter the ice floor. She recalls the old times when her hands would turn cold and Shozo wouldn't lift off his back from the chair. Ain peels off her second sweater, wiping her brow as the heat from all the labor work radiates off her. Just then, Shozo comes back, catching the sight of Ain's sparkling sweat. His face turns super red, and his body practically steaming off smoke. The dude can't handle Ain's heat this winter. A few days before New Year's, the whole family gathers at Grandpa Shozo's place. The elder son rolls with his crew, ready to lend a hand in this holiday spirit. Yoshiaki walks around, flexing like he is still in his prime youth. But Kei-Day knows the real deal, thinking that his knees are already plotting their revenge. However, Shozo carefully lets Yoshiaki know that it's not his game anymore, and better not show Kei-Day his lossy face. Shozo tells Yoshiaki to take a chill pill and let his body rest. Yoshiaki feels that every time his body declines, somehow he feels for the great old fathers. Moving on, Shozo asks for Ain's help outside. Ain doubles the trouble inside, piling in the flour like a baking overlord, while Shozo hammers away at the meat. He is showing off his beating skills, flaunting his muscle buff to lousy Yoshiaki and Kei-Day. They are stuck watching the whole thing, with Grandpa Shozo pulling off his signature hammer move. Later, he rolls up and builds a big old chubby ball of a snowman just for Mino. She is totally over the moon, screaming like a kid on Christmas. She calls Shozo the best grandpa in town, and these words would now circle in his mind for the whole day. Ain reveals that Grandpa Shozo is building snowmen for the sake of grandkids visiting on the new year. All of a sudden, Shozo did an outclassed job at recreating Haramaki Bear with the snow. Mino is on cloud 9 for having such a talented grandpa. Up next, Shozo wonders what's Kosuke's favorite character. Mino has all the answers, so she whips out her phone to show the Dark Phoenix Dragon. Akemi's kid, Shinji, is driving straight off Tokyo to arrive at Aomori and meet Grandpa Shozo's family on the new year. Well, Grandpa Shozo did his best to recreate the dragon, and the Akemi family is pretty much mind-blown. Although Kosuke loved the whole show, later, Ain welcomes her big sis back, with Takahiro's family finally arriving for the holiday spirit. Kosuke gifts Shiori her present. Playing with Kosuke, Shiori asks if Grandma Tsuru feeling the cold, though Shiori doesn't get what plays in her mind. Suddenly, Grandma Tsuru slides back down to play with the kids. On her first turn, Tsuru kicked off the big card in a slick move. She pulled off this stunt, freaking out the kids next to her. Their jaws dropped to the floor instantly while Tsuru asked for her mother's praise. Without further ado, Kosuke tries to blurt out the whole truth, but no adult would buy the story. At the time for the evening snack, the little naughty brat is massaging Shozo, leaving off his cranky dad and big old brother out of this. Up next, he marches down to massage Ain's shoulders, keeping Mino for the last. Shiori is damn sure the little brat must be cooking something shady. While Shiori gets her holiday money, Shozo gifts 500 yen and a library card to the little brat, whose strategy was a big fail. After dinner, the kids huddle up to binge watch The Farm Hazard. Meanwhile, the men drive headfirst into a sake showdown, while the women have a wild night of gossip. Shiori's mother, Kaoru, talks about dialing up the strict mode with Shiori, wondering if that's straining their mother-daughter bond. Ain passes her wisdom to be warm and watchful as she remembers the time of Takahiro's entrance exams. Then, Kei-Day shares her nursing fuss over a cranky man trying to boss her around. Ain explains that the hospital is a place to heal, not a customer's service ground. She asks the poor girl to be herself and pats her for being such a good girl. Moreover, Ain reveals that it's okay for mothers to cry once in a while too. The ladies huddle up to Ain's goddess-like warmth, and Shozo sees the whole thing. Even Shiori and Mino don't know what's the fuss over here. Later on, Ain and Shozo piled up 400 cards to send out for the new year, calling this their message service. However, they tell Shiori that it's their message to survive this year. In between this pile, Shiori picks off Shozo's fan club's New Year card. He recalls this belonging to Ain's Neighbor Association's card. Up next, Haisuke's card pasted a crazy wish of seeing his great-grandchildren. However, the old fools sent out their "We Turned Young Again" photo collage. While the side effects delivered days later with the telephone never shutting up for once, with everyone leaving, Kosuke's being a snobby brat who just won't let go off Grandpa Shozo. Akemi and others show Kosuke that his dad looks exactly like Grandpa Shozo, so he can put up with this dude. Kosuke isn't giving up on the original OG here. Just then, Grandma Ain swoops in with a giant stuffed teddy bear under her arm. She declares with a big grin that this big bear will always watch over Kosuke with Grandpa and Grandma. He explains that if they are not around, they'll still have his back. Thus, Shozo does pinky swear with Kosuke and finally sees them off. Ain gladly mentions being back to their old quiet routine. However, Shozo wouldn't keep the tears in and bawls his eyes out at seeing them off. The next morning, the old farts meet up with Shota and Mino at the apple farm. Thus, Shozo teaches his best tips and tricks to Shota, who's helping out clearing the branches. Shozo bet the little one would get the whole course in no time. Meanwhile, he demands to know what's his deal with Mino lately. This abrupt question jolts his mind with a thundershock. Shota blurts out that he is getting along fine. Shozo mentions that Haisuke is getting super hasty. Meanwhile, Ain and Mino watch crazy Shoto harnessing Shota, while Mino reveals her decision to take care of her own apple tree. Ain totally busts Mino's scheme to marry off Shota. Shota calls her Mino, and Mino jumps off a mile high in shock, telling Dumbo not to call her that in front of others. Also, Shozo is ready to leave the rest to Shota. Thus, the old folks let them be. Moving on, Shozo thinks of taking Ain for a walk and admires Mount Iwaki's beauty at this time of the year. However, he points out that it's not as gorgeous as his wife, and Ain strikes the old man. Sitting under the shade, Shozo talks about Shiori finally raising her stakes to clear the medicine exam, thanks to Satoshi's help. Not to mention, the Takahashi family wouldn't shut up about Shiori to Takahiro, and they hope to send in apples as a thank you next time. Furthermore, with Akemi's son off to live their lives, she had free time on her hands now. Yoshiaki finally found a job and kept his life steady. Shozo and Ain are sure their children will live fine now. At the next gate ball tournament, Ain bets that Minami City would take the win because Matsunoshu practiced hard this time. Shozo expects Akemi and others to visit the next summer vacation for fireworks. Just then, Shozo asks what's her wish, but Ain says that it has already come true. Closing their eyes, old Shozo asks old Ain what she wants for tomorrow. Ain reveals that she wants to stay by his side. Meanwhile, the sand totally slipped out of the hourglass. Time went by, and Shota and Mino turned up to spot the lovebirds sleeping under the shade peacefully.